Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Vorhies, your host. I'm the Editorial Director with Data Science Central and also Chief Data Scientist for Data Magnum. So I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Tableau for sponsoring today's event. Tableau is a longtime supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. Now, today's webinar is entitled Ask Data, Simplifying Analytics with Natural Language, and that'll be presented by Tableau. But before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. Today's event will be an hour long. We have two presenters who I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A following the presentation, and this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. Now, I'd also like to particularly encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation, as we'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. Well, I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Samantha Kwok and Ruhaab Markas, both with Tableau. Now, Samantha is a Senior Manager of Engineering at Tableau, where she manages the natural language processing and advanced analytics teams in Tableau development. She and her team are focused on building more innovative ways for everyone to interact with data, lowering the barrier to analytics and improving data science experiences in Tableau. Now, Ruhaab is a Senior Product Manager at Tableau, and he leads product for Ask Data. He works at the intersection of strategy, engineering, design, and research. So Samantha, Ruhaab, thanks for being with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. Now, what if you could directly ask questions of your data? Ask Data, Tableau's new natural language capability, allows people to get insights by simply conversing with the data. And in today's Data Science Central webinar, members of Tableau's Ask Data team will demonstrate how they're lowering the barrier to analytics and leveraging natural language processing as a tool for visual analysis. So looking to quickly make smarter, data-informed decisions and empower others to do the same? In today's detailed overview of Ask Data, you'll learn more. So Samantha, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can begin just as soon as you're ready to go.
Thank you, Bill. We are extremely excited to be here today. So let's get right into it. We're here to talk about Ask Data, and there's a lot to go through. So let's kick things off with a quick example of what we mean by natural language capabilities. Hey, Ruhaab, how are recent sales for chairs in Cali doing?
Samantha, they're doing pretty well. We sold $1 million of chairs in the last month.
Wow, that's awesome. So as you can see, this was a very natural interaction because our brain is really good about using common sense to infer ambiguous terms like recent and filling in missing information. For example, chairs is really referring to a subcategory of products, and Cali is really referring to the state of California. This type of really natural experience is the experience that we would like you to have and we would like to build for you when you're interacting with your data in Tableau. So now that we have an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about natural language, let's go and jump into a couple of poll questions so we have an idea of who we have in the audience today. So the first poll question is, which option best describes your analytical proficiency? Would you consider yourself to be an expert who may be a data scientist, really familiar with designing and applying statistical or machine learning algorithms? Would you consider yourself to be a moderate who maybe have business questions and really looking at analyzing data in a full-time setting, or a casual user who's not in a full-time analytical role, but leveraged data as part of your job on a daily basis? Awesome. So it looks like we have a pretty good spread of people today. Welcome. It looks like we have a lot of majority of the users who are moderate business intelligence analysts. That's fantastic because a lot of what we're trying to build is actually for you. And so we're looking forward to some of the Q&A sessions at the end. All right, so the next poll question. it would be really great if we knew how you currently use, or do you currently use or interact with Tableau today? Would you consider yourself to be a power user who really just knows your way around Tableau? Would you consider yourself to be a casual user? And it's completely okay if you have never heard of Tableau at a non-user, because we would love to tell you more about that today too. Phew, I was a little bit nervous for a second there. Cool. So we do have a lot of really power users today, and we have a good spread between casual and non-users as well. That's fantastic because we would love to hear feedback from all sorts of people with different experiences for using Tableau. So jumping right into what we will be talking about today. So Ruhaab and I have a lot of content to cover. So first of all, we would love to tell you a little bit about why we're building natural language capabilities and how that fits into the broader Tableau vision. And then we would like to, through some demos, show you how easy it is to get started with Ask Data, what are some of the natural language system capabilities, as well as some tips on how to get the most out of the natural language experience, which is Ask Data in Tableau. We hope that by the end of this webinar, you will have a really good understanding of how you can use natural language to analyze your data in Tableau and be inspired to try it out for yourself. So with that, let's take a step back and look at how Ask Data fits into the broader Tableau vision.
Thanks, Samantha. Our mission in Tableau has always been to help people see and understand data. And people is at the center of that mission. Ultimately, we build products for people and our amazing customers. And with Ask Data, we truly believe that we can help even more people achieve this goal to help them see and understand data. Oftentimes in organizations, we see a very similar pattern of communication between analysts and consumers. When business and casual consumers of data need a question answered, they typically go to the analyst with some requirements, and they build the reports or go mine the data, and it's a very one-sided conversation. And Tableau has really helped lower the barrier to analytics with our classical products, but with Ask Data, we believe that we can lower the barrier to analytics even further by enabling these consumers of data to answer more questions more easily through natural language. And ultimately, we want to drive a better engagement and communication model between the analysts and the consumers. By doing so, we'll enable the analysts to answer more questions by freeing up more time. How many times have you been bombarded with really simple questions that you would hope people will be able to answer on their own, but for a variety of reasons they're not able to? By taking some of that away from the analyst's backlog, they will have more time to really focus on the more challenging questions and analytical problems the organization faces. And with all of these cylinders firing, we will really be embarking in a new generation of self-service analytics that will benefit the entire organization. But before we get started about talking about natural language, let's take a step back and look at all the various investments of smart analytics that Tableau is making in the platform. You may have noticed our recommendation engine, which highlights recommended joins, data sources, and content throughout the Tableau platform today. With automated discovery, we're making discovering root causes in your data much more easy. Imagine if you have sales data over a time series graph and you notice a dip in sales in January. Imagine being able to click into that specific mark and seeing all the probable reasons as to why sales dipped in January. That's our vision with automated discovery, and we're really excited about introducing that feature later this year. With model automation, we're simplifying modeling your data in Tableau. No more having to understand the schema and primary key and foreign key mappings for data. You'll be able to simply select a data source or a table and see all the probable joins that data source has and seeing the entire lineage of how that data is connected. We're calling that object model, and that's coming to beta very soon. With smart data prep, we're flipping data preparation on its head. We've all heard the paradigm that a data scientist or an analyst spends 80% of their time cleaning their data and only 20% of their time analyzing it. That just seems wrong. And our vision with Tableau Prep is to make data preparation a visual, direct, and a one-click operation to clean and schedule data flows so that you always have access to the most reliable data. And then there's natural language, which is where we'll spend most of our time talking today. But I just wanted to take a second to highlight how natural language fits into the broader investments of smart analytics that Tableau is making in its platform.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ruhaab. All right, so let's jump right into demos. We are super excited because we literally just launched yesterday, so I can't be happier to demo everything today. So let's get started with just showing how easy it is to get into Ask Data and start getting some quick insights. Because a lot of time, all you're really looking for is a quick answer to somebody's question. For example, your boss might be asking you, hey, like, what are the sales figures from last week? For us, since we just launched Ask Data, our boss is always asking us, hey, how many users have we had so far on Ask Data? How many queries have been asked on Ask Data? So imagine a situation where your boss might be asking you, hey, we have a contract with a client that is expiring, and we need you to plan an event to wine and dine our clients so that we can convince them to renew their contract. And I really need you to tell me the plans by end of day today. Well, man, that's not a lot of time. I know I already have a lot of work on my plate, so I really just need something quick and simple. Hey, Ruhaab, what do we know about this client that we can get just something quick whipped together?
Samantha, I've heard they like really expensive wine.
Okay. Well, expensive wine. I can work with that. I know that we have a data source on wine, so let's see if we can get some quick answers using Ask Data. So jumping right into the demo. All right, so we are logged into Tableau Online in this case. Ask Data is part of Tableau Online and Tableau Server. So let me quickly look up what we know about wines. Okay, great. So we do have a data source on wines. So let me click into that really quickly. And then we are navigated to the new Ask Data natural language experience. So as we get into this new experience, we can immediately see that on the page, I can hover over these suggestions that are generated automatically by the system. And by clicking on any of these, it would really help me to get started on how the system works. And if I navigate over to the left side and hover over some of the dimensions and measures, I can quickly see that there's an enhanced tooltip that allows me to see some of the most common values. So for example, under country, some of the most common values are US and France, which makes a lot of sense considering this is a wines data source. So the first thing that I usually do when I'm coming across a new data set is I'd like to find out how large is this data source to get an idea of, does this have enough data for me to draw some conclusions? So let me go ahead and ask, how many wineries are there? So distinct count of wineries. That sounds like what I'm looking for. So let me click into that. And then I can see that there is over 9,000 wineries. So as you can see, it is extremely quick for me to get immediate insight automatically. So now that we feel like we know that there's a pretty good sample size of information in this data set, let's go and find out what we can do with the system. So considering our clients really enjoy expensive wines, let's go and start with asking what is the top 10 most expensive winery. Top 10 wineries by most expensive price sounds like what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and select that first interpretation. So immediately I'm taken to a viz that's automatically generated by Ask Data, showing me the top 10 wineries with the most expensive one being Chateau Petrus. That sounds suspiciously French. I'm going to guess we are not going to have budget to fly myself as well as our clients over to France. So let's filter that down to something maybe a little bit more local. Okay, so as you can see, I simply typed in US, and the system is able to automatically understand that I'm referring to country in US. Of course, we understand that different people will refer to different things. We will refer to the same thing in different ways. For example, US is often referred to United States. So this is part of the magic of the system. Tableau understands a lot of these global concepts, so you can actually go and type in however way is most natural for you, for example, United States or US. The other thing I'd like to point out is going through the data source itself, notice in the country dimension, the value inside that data source is really just US. But we're adding these global concepts to enable you to speak in the way that's most natural to you. So let's go ahead and filter down to country in US. Great. So now we can see the top 10 wineries by most expensive price in the country US. Yao Ming Winery. Bill, I don't know how much you know about wineries, but Yao Ming Winery sounds a little bit, the name sounds kind of familiar. Ruhaab, do you know?
Samantha, I'm pretty sure he's a basketball player.
Yeah, so that's probably not going to be the best winery to bring our clients to. I would probably choose something that's a little bit more well-known from a winery perspective. So, as you can see, this was super easy to get started with Ask Data. It works out of the box with live data sources and data extracts, and is fully integrated into Tableau Online, seen in this example, and Tableau Server today. It's extremely quick for me to get to the answer that I'm looking for simply by asking a question in the way that I speak. So for example, most expensive wineries. So under the hood, this experience is powered by our smart parser technology, which understands that people ask questions in many different ways, but the system will still automatically interpret and give you back the same results. So let's talk about how that's actually being powered underneath the hood. So earlier, I talked a little bit about automatic semantic enrichment of information using the example country in US. So this is one of the examples how we are making this experience a little bit more magic for you guys. So let me switch back over to the slides for a quick second. Okay. All right, so some of the things that we talked about a little bit earlier is enriching the data model. So with Tableau, we already know a lot about global concepts. For example, we know that US is commonly referred to as United States and vice versa. There are a lot of concepts that are going to be global across all data sources. Another example of that is a week is always going to be 7 days. These types of concepts we already know about. So Ask Data automatically leverages all of these concepts to automatically enrich the underlying data model for you, which means you can ask questions about the data using the vocabulary that you're most comfortable with without you having to do anything at all. So imagine if you have a data source with date information. You would be able to ask questions about dates, weeks, months, because we already understand what these concepts mean. Similarly, Tableau already knows a lot about statistical functions, such as, for example, mean, median. You can ask questions about these functions even if your data source doesn't contain these calculations. But of course, beyond some of these more global enrichment, global concepts, we anticipate that you're probably going to have your own synonyms that are unique to your organization, your team, etc. So we have also enabled the ability for you to go and bring your own synonyms. So if you happen to have a data source with cat information, I urge you to please add synonyms for things like feline, kitty, and fluffy overlords, just to make it a little bit more fun for users who are using your data source for Ask Data. So let me switch back to doing a quick demo to show you how to add your own synonyms. So jumping back into the wines data set. So I know I typically refer to wineries as wineries, but I know that Ruhaab generally prefers to refer to wineries as vineyards. So just to make the experience more natural for Ruhaab later on, I'm going to go ahead and select winery, go and select edit synonyms, and I'm going to go ahead and add in vineyard. Clicking save. And now hovering over winery, I can see that the synonym vineyard has been added. So let's go ahead and try to ask the same question. Top 10 most expensive vineyard in US. So as you can see, the system automatically now understands that the word vineyard refers to the same as means the same as winery. So go ahead, top 10 wineries by most expensive price, country in US. Let me go ahead and select that. So now I'm giving back. Now I'm able to get back to the same results by using the word vineyard instead, which feels probably more natural to some people. So now let me go ahead and switch back to the slide. All right. So getting back to the example, right? In my quest to find a winery to bring our clients to, I took the approach of already deciding that we wanted to bring them to the most expensive winery. So as you can see, in that example where I have a very specific question in mind and I have a very specific approach in mind, all I really wanted to do is to get to a quick answer. So Ask Data is really, really good when you need that quick insight. But Ask Data also has very, very powerful analytical capabilities, which means it is fantastic for more in-depth data analysis, data exploration, and full analytical workflows. So let's see what that would look like if we were to take a different approach.
Thanks, Samantha. So I'm going to walk through a similar, I will use the same data source, but I will kind of walk through a different workflow in terms of exploring my data. So I will also hop right into a quick demo. And here you can see I'm in the same data source on wines. But before I get started, I want to learn a little bit more about the data itself and go through a very standard exploratory data analysis workflow. I know there's pricing data in here. I can see price, and by hovering over the measures, I can actually see the distribution of price with the min, max, and average. Some descriptive statistics that help you understand a little bit more about the distribution of your measures. But I can also ask for this information in natural language, like asking for what is the average price. Select the corresponding interpretation, and there you can see that the average price of this wine data set is $35. Now, if I want to see what the average price is for all of the various countries in my data source, I can simply type in the word country and select that option. And what we get back is a map. There's a lot of intelligence built into Ask Data, which will give you the most appropriate default visualization. Knowing that country is a geographic field, we're able to use the same technology as Show Me to give you a default map representation for this query. And the beauty about this visualization is that it's a Tableau viz, so it's interactive. I can hover over any of these countries and see the underlying data directly in this tooltip. I notice that the average price for Canada is 36. There's some darker colors in Europe. Looks like Switzerland has a $160 average price, and as I would expect, some of the European countries have a higher average price. But Samantha pretty much decided that we're not going to Europe on a winery trip, so let's filter this data again just to the United States. So let's add the word United States and select that interpretation. So I was successful in filtering this down to the US, but it's aggregated at the entire country level. So if I want to see a more granular view of all the various states and the average price broken down by state, I can simply append the word state. And here you can see that state maps to the field province, which we've added a synonym for state. So again, synonyms are a great way of enhancing the natural language experience by providing more relevant and colloquial terms for your users to leverage. So let's go ahead and select province. And immediately I can see this visualization broken down by state. And the color gradients highlight price on average going from lowest to highest. And I can see that the Pacific Northwest has the highest price on average. So price is definitely a great way to assess wine, but quality is another measure of evaluating wine. And in this instance, quality is defined by points, which is a numerical value ranging from 0 to 100, indicating the quality and goodness of that wine. So let's go ahead and see if we can see the average points for all the states in the US. I can do that by asking a brand new query, similar to how I expressed the current query, or I can leverage any of the existing pills in line here to make quick modifications. So if I want to change average price to, let's say, the average points, I can simply do that by clicking into this pill. Notice the blue underline. And I can easily change the aggregation type that's inferred into that measure. So as I mentioned, I can change the aggregation type. So if I want to see the median or count or sum, I can do that. And I can also change the dimensions and measures. So as I mentioned earlier, I would like to see the average points. So I will leave average, click on points, and hit accept. And you'll notice that there was some subtle change in the visualization. Looks like the Pacific Northwest also has the highest points on average, which is interesting because now I'm thinking there might be a correlation between points and price. But let's explore that relationship to validate that hypothesis. So I'm going to ask a new question to explore the average price by points. Select the interpretation. And you can see that Tableau defaults to a line chart, which is the most appropriate visualization for this type of query. And as I expected, as the points and quality of wine increases, so does the price on average. And it looks like after about 98 points, there's an exponential increase in the price of the wine. That's really interesting. But let's go back to our previous visualization, which was the average points by country, and just pick a state that has the highest average points. It looks like California has 88 points, Oregon has 89, and Washington has a little bit over 89. So it looks like Oregon has the highest quality wine on average. So I'm going to limit my search to explore some of the vineyards in Oregon. And as we mentioned earlier, our clients like really expensive wine. So similar to how Samantha filtered her data, I am also going to look at the top 10 most expensive vineyards in Oregon. So actually, let me just change that. Top 10 most expensive vineyards in Oregon. Great. Let's try that in an additive way. So top 10 most expensive vineyards, we added that. Let's filter this down to Oregon. And here you can see, as I'm searching for the state Oregon, I can see that in the interpretation, that value exists in two separate fields. There's a county called Oregon and province. So as data searches through all of the index values and highlights all the probable fields which may contain that value so that you can make the selection that best represents your intent. So here, I really meant province, which is a state, in this data source, and I will go ahead and select that. So here, we can see the top 10 most expensive wineries by price in the state of Oregon. Again, given that this is a Tableau viz, I can hover over each of these values to see the number of records and maximum price for each of these wineries. It looks like by hovering over the top 4 that Adelsheim actually has the most number of records. And number of records for this data source indicates the number of varieties of wine. So essentially it's how many options of wines do they have available. So Adelsheim may be a good option. So let's explore some of the varieties at Adelsheim by simply typing in variety at Adelsheim. And notice again, I did not have to specify that Adelsheim was a winery. I can very naturally express specific values, and Ask Data takes a lot of that complexity of knowing data mapping away from the user. So let's go ahead and select that interpretation. And we can see a distribution of the different varietals at Adelsheim. Looks like they have a lot of Pinot Noirs, which is great. And notice that we inferred an aggregation on sum of number of records because I really underspecified my previous query. But again, if we want to change sum of number of records to reflect price, I can simply change that by clicking into the pill, changing the measure to price, and also modifying my aggregation to maximum. We'll hit accept, and now we can see the maximum price for each of the varietals at Adelsheim. If I want to see exactly which specific wine belongs to each of these varieties, I can ask for a breakdown by title. And now I can see that I'm not even trying to pronounce that, the Chaland Mountains Pinot Noir is the most expensive variety at Adelsheim and might be a great bottle to order for our clients. So just another way of illustrating that there's a lot of different exploratory analytical flows that you can take, and Ask Data really helps support your creative workflows through the analytical process. Great, so let's hop back into some slides, and I will let Samantha talk through some of the smart things that are happening behind the scenes. I'll skip over this slide really quickly, but let's just take a second to highlight that there are 5 supported analytical capabilities in Ask Data. Aggregations, so in this example, how many vineyards is a distinct count. You saw me add groupings to my variables, filtering data, limits. There was a lot of examples of top 10. And you can also sort your data. All these analytical capabilities are supported through the natural language dialogue. Samantha?
Thank you, Ruhaab. Yes. So we have so far hopefully shown you how easy it is to get started with Ask Data, some of the powerful analytical capabilities. So let's spend a few minutes talking about the smartness of the system and what makes it really intelligent. So as we were doing demos, you might have noticed that we never really had to specify the viz type. We built a lot of smart logic into the system to automatically infer the best visualization for the given data source that you have, as well as the context based on your question. So for example, in this viz right here, we're asking about average points by country. The fact that you're asking about country, most likely the best visualization will be a map. And that's why we're trying to make sure that to make the experience as quick as possible for you to get to the insight. For those power users who are very familiar with Tableau, this is actually built on top of the Show Me experience in Tableau today. So we've had quite a number of iterations on refining that smart detection on the best visualization type. Another aspect that we've spent some time on improving is providing a default sort order. So again, for the power users who are very familiar with building bar charts in Tableau, most of the time when you're building a bar chart, the first thing you would do is hover over to the top, click on that sort button. So with Ask Data, we've decided to do that automatically for you because we understand that most of the time when you're asking questions like average wine by winery, you would probably want to see things in a sort order to make a little bit more sense of the data that you're getting back. The idea behind that is we want to keep you in your analytical flow as much as possible, and we would really like to reduce anything that will slow you down, including a single click to just sort the results. Misspelling. So this is by far my favorite feature or non-feature for Ask Data. As you saw, Ruhaab and I both made a lot of different typos throughout today's session. So thank God for our team building the system to understand typos. Of course, it's not going to be magic. So if you have your cat randomly walking through a keyboard, our system is not going to be able to detect something like that extreme. Ambiguity resolution. So as humans, when we converse, there's a lot of ambiguity that's built in that we may not notice. So for example, when we're talking about 2013 wines, hopefully most of you will automatically understand that I'm really referring to vintage 2013. However, to a computer, 2013 is really just any numerical value. It could be a year, it could be a price. So we spent quite a bit of time building some smart ranking algorithm in place to try to get the most out of what you're asking about. So in this case, when asking about 2013 wines, we automatically infer that to be vintage in 2013. Similarly, there's a lot of underspecified concepts, or when we're talking from human-to-human conversations. So in this example, wine prices over time. For humans, it's quite easy to understand what over time means. You're probably envisioning a viz that has time on the x-axis. But to a computer, there is really no good definition of over time. So similarly, Ask Data, we try to fill in as much of these missing information and missing gaps as possible to get you to the answer that you're looking for in the fastest way. So in this case, we are inferring over time to be vintage year. Something else that we spent quite a bit of time building into the system is adding advanced concepts. So going back to our first demo, talking about most expensive wines, these are some of the advanced concepts that we've added to the system to enable you to ask questions in a more natural way. And advanced concepts, for example, expensive as well as popular. So these concepts, they don't really have a pure definition, but with given additional context on what you're asking about, as well as what information is available in your data source, then we can start inferring what expensive could mean. And again, the goal here is really just to enable you to ask questions in the most natural way possible, and it does not require anybody to learn to speak like a computer. So those are some of the different advanced concepts that we've added. Then there's plenty more in the system. So with that, let's go through and bring everything together with another demo just to show you how easy, powerful, and smart Ask Data really is.
Thanks, Samantha. So I will walk through another quick demonstration of Ask Data on a different data source, just to prove that it does work on data that's not wine related. So just like how I did earlier, I'm going to walk through some very basic exploratory analysis. And the data source that I'm working with here are professional sports players and their respective salaries, where they're from, and how much experience that they have. So let's ask how many players. You can see that it maps to distinct count of player is what I was looking for. And it appears there's 2,036 players in this data source. Let's find out what is their average salary. What is the average salary? We'll select that interpretation. And looks like for all these athletes, on average, they make about $2.8 million. That must be nice. Maybe in a different lifetime, that should have been my professional career of choice. Okay, if we want to look at the average experience, again, I can use this refinement experience to quickly change my existing query from average salary to average experience by looking for that dimension. hitting accept, and it looks like on average they have about 5.3 years of experience. Okay, those were some pretty basic questions, but let's explore more of the salary information and find out who has the highest salary. So I can ask questions such as, who has the highest salary? We can see a matching interpretation for maximum salary by player. I will go ahead and select that. And in the results, you'll see that we've automatically selected a bar chart and sorted this in descending order as well. And it's much more analytically relevant for me to compare the maximum salary with all the other values as well. And so we can see the relative comparison of the various data in the viz. But as you saw earlier, there's 2,000 players in this data source. So I can segment or limit my data really easily by simply appending something like the top 10 players by adding in top 10, choosing the corresponding dropdown, and you'll see that we immediately limit this to the top 10 players. There are some really familiar athletes here, Alex Rodriguez, Kobe Bryant, but I'm not really familiar with some of these other individuals like Ryan Howard or Roy Halladay. Not sure which sport they play. So let's break this down by sport. Looking at my dimensions, I can see that I have an attribute called league, which has my professional sport information. But I don't like to refer to leagues in that way. So let's add a synonym for sports. I'll go ahead and save that. And you can notice that that synonym is immediately available for use. So let's break this down by sports. And now I can see each of the players and their respective sport. Looks like of the top 10 salaries, 80% of them belong to Major League Baseball. But we can also layer in additional information, such as country. So if I want to have a better understanding of which countries these players came from, we can simply type in country. Select that. And now we can see this nested grouping of which sport and countries each of these top 10 players belong to. If the top 10 is too narrow of a lens, I can expand that by using that same click and refinement experience. We can click in the top 10, change that to the top 20 or bottom 10, 20, or N, and hit accept. And we can see that reflected in the visualization almost instantly. Great. Let's explore some more questions. If I'm curious to know what the average salary is for all of the leagues, because it looks like I actually don't have any of the NHL data in here, it's just MLB and NBA, we can explore the average salary by sport. You can see I totally misspelled average, but we're able to recover from that. Thank you, spell correct. And I can see the breakdown of the average salary by each sport. I can even control the visualization type through natural language by typing in tree map and change the visualization. Or I can leverage this dropdown in the top right corner to also manage and control my visualizations. And since we're leveraging the Show Me technology, we'll only ever show you viable options for supported visualizations. So you don't see a scatter plot here because we have categorical data at play, and that would make sense. So we'll only ever show you relevant options. Let's take a look at how salary and experience might relate to one another. So I may ask a question like average salary by experience. And as I would have imagined, as my experience grows, so does my salary proportionally. And after about 6 years, it seems like there's a love and hate relationship between experience and salary. But let's break this down by sport. Again, I can simply type in the word sport and break down this visualization by sport. I have an outlier here that I can choose to exclude. And there I have a better distribution of my data. I can also filter this temporal data by looking at a certain segment of years. So if I'm only interested in, let's say, the first 10 years, I can simply ask to filter between 0 and 10. Oops, that's an O, not a 0. Great. Now, I've filtered my data down to the years of interest. And just with any Tableau visualization, I can save this down into a workbook. And do a variety of additional things. I can construct a dashboard, I can share this with colleagues, I can add alerts, or even subscribe player or individuals to this workbook. That's the power of integrating Ask data into the Tableau platform. Samantha, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ruhaab. So with that, we have a few tips that we would like to share with you on some of the best practices. So keep in mind that these are just general recommendations that we have for you when working with Tableau or working with data in general, and it's really not specific to Ask data. One of the most important things is being able to anticipate the types of questions that your business users might ask of your data, and then really helping to make that experience more natural for them by either adding calculated fields, adding some synonyms, as we have shown you throughout the course of today. In particular, one of the fields that we really recommend adding a synonym for is the number of records field. Oftentimes, that is not super clear, but it is a field that exists for all of your data sources. Calculated fields is also really key as well. So, for example, if you have a data source that contains profit and sales, but you anticipate your users might be asking about profit margins or profit ratios, creating a calc would make it more natural for your consumers as well. So those are some of the tips that we have for you for today. And then I'll pass it over to Ruhaab to talk a little bit about our exciting news from yesterday.
Yeah, we're so excited to announce that Ask Data is available with the 2019.1 release, which was announced yesterday. So if you are a Tableau customer, you have access to Ask Data right now. It's available both on Tableau Server and Tableau Online for creators, explorers, and interactors at no additional cost. So we really encourage you to give it a shot for yourself and provide feedback. And Ask Data, if we boil it down, it's really easy to use, extremely powerful, both in its analytical capabilities and its integration into the Tableau platform at large. And as you saw, there's a ton of smart capabilities built in, from default behaviors to interpreting ambiguous and underspecified inputs. All of that will help to build a more natural and delightful experience for your users. And that's pretty much all of our content. So thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about Ask Data. And if you're interested, please scan this QR code and take our survey. And specifically, if you're interested in partnering in usability tests or other research, we will certainly be in touch if you fill out this survey. So thanks again for taking the time to hear us talk about natural language and Ask Data at Tableau.
Well, Samantha, Ruhaab, hey, thank you for that excellent presentation, and wow, some really exciting evolution of your Tableau product. We'll get started with today's Q&A session, and I want to thank the audience for their participation. We've had a lot of questions that have come in, and we'll do our best to get through all of them in the time remaining. So during this Q&A session, we'll leave up this screen with contact information for Samantha and Ruhaab in case you'd like to contact them following today's webinar. So let's get started. Samantha, Ruhaab, when you did this development, did you anticipate that this would be primarily used by power users or moderate users or business users? Who's really the target for this?
Bill, that's a great question. And as we saw in the poll, there's a wide representation of the skills that you would see in an organization. There's expert data scientists, there's consumers of data, and there's analysts. And we really think that Ask Data has value for all of those users. For the typical consumers of data, this is a great way to lower that barrier to analytics and empower them to try out self-service analytics. For analysts, it's a great way to just quickly run ad hoc queries. It's much simpler than writing a script, or sometimes it's even faster than what you can do in Tableau. And for data scientists, I think the best and the biggest benefit is alleviating a lot of your backlog of requests that you get from analysts or typical business users of answering very simple questions, because now we can empower all people in an organization to access data.
Oh, terrific. Oh, thanks for that explanation. Now, the audience is anxious to push you even further than you wanted to go. So the question comes up multiple times. Okay, so it's in server and online. What are your plans for bringing it to desktop, if any?
That's a great question, and one that I receive quite frequently. Our vision for Ask Data is for it to be ubiquitous across the platform. You saw that Samantha went to a data source to access Ask Data, but we want to make it an even much more discoverable part of the analytical experience throughout the platform. And there's a variety of different ways to make that happen. Desktop might be one of those destinations, but typically what we find is that desktop is really oriented for the power user of Tableau, the creators, people who are very, very familiar with Tableau. So while we don't have short-term plans of integrating Ask Data into desktop, we have an eye on that and may bring those capabilities at a later time. So currently it's available for server and online, and desktop is in our sort of evaluation, but we don't have a set time for that just yet.
Okay, terrific. Oh, thanks. And of course, still looking for more capabilities that you haven't talked about yet. What about simply being able to use spoken language to query via NLP? Is that on your plan?
Oh yeah, that's a very, very common question, because with natural language, the natural way to think about it is actually speaking. That's definitely on our radar, not currently capable, not currently available as part of our first release, but it is definitely on our roadmap. And there's a lot more just to kind of start planting seeds on some of the things that we're thinking about. With natural language, it's very easy to kind of jump into voice, which then really leads to jumping to things like mobile, and people have already been asking for desktop and things like that. So there's a lot of different places that we're investigating on expanding our natural language support. So keep a close eye on some of the things that's upcoming for future Tableau releases.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, you could really tell from the audience questions that they're excited to have as much as this as they can get. Another question that comes from the audience is, it appears in your first rollout here that most of what we saw were filters of one kind or another. But what about projections like time series or other types of machine learning algorithms that might be used to extend the data that we've derived from Ask Data?
That's a great question. And we sort of see the analytical world in two key dimensions. There's a descriptive statistics of describing behaviors and patterns that have already happened, and then there's the predictive, what's happening next. Currently in the Tableau platform, in our advanced analytical capabilities, we have the ability to fit regression and forecasting models as well as clustering models in your data. It's only natural for us to start absorbing and incorporating those capabilities into Ask Data as well, and that is certainly in the horizon. Our first release is pretty much what you saw today as kind of more in the descriptive landscape, but we're absolutely moving into the more predictive and integrating with the capabilities like forecasting and clustering that you see in Tableau today.
Okay, well, what you've shown us is really magic, and I can only imagine that the next releases are going to be even more interesting. The audience is interested to know, once they have created these derived values through a series of filters, can they then download those derived values back into the database, and two, can they perform mathematical functions on them, like doing a multiplication to extend an average value to a total value?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's two key parts to that. One, database writebacks. So we do have the ability through Tableau extensions to write back data into your databases. So you would have to leverage our extensions platform to do that. And secondly, I heard calculations. I think that's a fantastic question. And one of the first things you'll see in our subsequent release is the ability to create calculations dynamically with natural language. So being able to add or subtract or take ratios, we will be able to support that with natural language without having to use our calculation builder that you typically would build calcs in Tableau. So we're really excited about bringing in new capabilities, and we're just getting started. Calcs is just scratching the surface, and we can't wait to get more feedback from you and kind of keep pumping out awesome new features.
Oh, terrific. Oh, can't wait myself. Now, some technical questions having to do with who can do what and permissions. For example, in adding synonyms, who or what type of user can add synonyms? What permissions are required?
That's a great question. So with our first release, that's open to anybody who has access to view the data source. So we can make it as easy as possible for people to start adding synonyms. But we have heard a lot of feedback from our beta users as well as our launch already to say that, hey, we want a little bit more governance. We want a little bit more permissions control over who can do different types of actions. So we're actually actively already taking that feedback into account and starting to build out a little bit more of a structure around how we think about adding synonyms, how we think about additional things that we may want to do to kind of enrich that experience a little bit more. So with the first release, it's going to be pretty straightforward with anybody. If you have access to the data source, you would be able to add synonyms, but you'll see that evolving over subsequent releases to have a little bit more permissioning model around it, as well as a little bit more advanced capabilities for as well.
And just to add on the permissioning in general, Samantha highlighted the permissioning model for synonyms, but if I take a step back and just talk about permissioning in general, any of the permissions that you've set up in Tableau server or online at the data source, project, or site level are all adhered to by Ask Data. So there's no extra steps you have to take to reconfigure those permissions, which is just another great example of why the platform of Tableau is so powerful, and everything that we do within that is very easy to manage. So yeah, just wanted to add that additional context.
Oh, well, terrific. Thank you. And maybe time for one last question, and it's related to permissions in a broad sense, and it's from a server admin, and that person wonders what type of data or reporting a server admin could see about the queries that are being asked of Ask Data, presumably so that they could improve performance.
I love that question in so many different ways. You guys are just mind readers. A lot of what you've mentioned and a lot of the questions are things that are under active consideration. So in the very next release of Ask Data, you will see a brand new usage analytics view for data source owners so that they have a better sense of what kind of queries are being asked of their data source, what are the most commonly used fields, what does usage look like on the data source, all with the goal of arming you with information to optimize your data source to make it much more engaging for end consumers. So that work is actively underway, and we're happy to announce that that will be available in the next release of Ask Data.
Well, Samantha, Ruhaab, hey, thank you for some great answers to some very good questions. And for those of you that asked questions today that weren't answered, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to Samantha, Ruhaab, and the Tableau team so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. Now, I have just a few quick announcements. If you'd please mark your calendars for March 12th, that's our next DSC webinar, and that's Making AI Work in the Real World, how real companies get real value with AI. And remember that today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today, and you can find that on the home page of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. And by the way, all our past webinars are also available on demand at datasciencecentral.com. And if you haven't had the opportunity to look at them, I encourage you to thumb through them. They provide some very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. Well, This brings today's webinar to a close, and I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions. A special thanks again to Tableau for their sponsorship, and particularly our speakers today, Samantha Kwok and Ruhaab Markas, for their insights into today's topic. Well, this is Bill Vorhies. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you all again on March 12th. Have a great day.